Here's what's coming up in episode 208, Meg Goetz. I heard that you don't incorporate the paranormal into your comedy, really.
It's hard because I feel like the perspective you have to take is you don't believe in it, right? Because a lot of stand-up is kind of making fun of the weird and being like, look at these dummies that all believe ghosts are real. But my energy is very like, I'm going to be cute and fun, but we're going to talk about my grandma being buried in a pet cemetery.
What?
And you're gonna, yeah, it's a true story. That's a real thing that I talk about on stage. But instead of feeling scared, I felt peaceful. I felt happy and I felt curious. And I reached my hand out into the mist and it was tingly. It had a sensation to it.
Welcome to the Big Seance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
Meg Goetz is a Philadelphia-based comedian and the host of the true paranormal stories podcast, Real Chills. She grew up in a haunted house built in the 1700s, and I can't wait for you to hear her stories. So quick, pour that tea. All right, welcome to the Big Seance Parlor, Meg Goetz. How are you?
I'm great. We're yelling. I'm excited.
Yeah! You are my first comic on the podcast, and I am so excited to have this new, category
Wow.
of guest.
That means I'm the best comic that's been on your podcast.
You are the best comic.
Yes. Nailing it.
I'm sure I've got people who think that they're comics. But yeah, I've had artists, I've had film directors, I've had producers, I've had investigator scientists, authors, I've had singers.
Honestly, all much more impressive professions than comedians.
I don't know about that because I feel like everybody can relate to a comic.
Sure.
And also use what you do as therapy.
Yeah.
Like we have art therapy, music therapy. There needs to be like comedian therapy or comedy therapy. Like that needs to be a new thing.
It's amazing because there's such a fine line, though, because open mics are so different than like live shows. And sometimes it's a little bit too much therapy and not enough comedy. And you're like, ooh, gotta get, you can talk about your dead dad, but I'd like at least one punchline to get, to be able to sleep at night. So.
And, we're going to go into your background, and you have a podcast called Real Chills, which I've been checking out and listening to. But I heard that you don't incorporate the paranormal into your comedy, really. Why is that?
Okay, so I want to so badly. It's so funny because one of my comedian friends, he's out in Chicago. Shout out Stockwell. He's a maniac. He always is like, no one cares. Like, you can't write jokes about the paranormal. And it's hard because I feel like the perspective you have to take is you don't believe in it, right? Because a lot of stand-up is kind of making fun of the weird and being like, look at these dummies that all believe ghosts are real. So I'm trying to really get in. I'm now trying harder to get people into the paranormal, but it's a tall order because I need to get them to believe in ghosts or at least open their brains a little bit before I can even start writing jokes. So I'm not never going to do it. I've been working on it, but like it's so difficult to get people on board.
You have to cherish those moments you get when you're on stage to stand up, I would imagine. And it's probably a risk to start a few jokes like that. And, you have to kind of test it out, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's kind of like what you're saying. If I'm doing like a fundraiser or something, and I know like it's a bunch of parents, especially like blue collar areas around Philly, they just want to relax. They want to hear jokes about like family and kids. I don't have kids, but I was a kid. So I can at least, I have jokes about my parents, but ghosts and stuff, might not be their bag. And it's some people's, and that's really exciting for me to like pick those people out of the crowd. But I have to be willing to admit, like, it's going to take a while for me to it's like a slow burn getting everybody to enjoy it. So
how would you describe your comedy?
So I think it's a lot about my family and about my experiences. People, like, others have kind of described it as like dealing with stuff that really sucks with like the most optimistic viewpoint.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So like, and I feel like my energy is very positive, but then I talk about really dark stuff. Like I talk about like my little brother's motorcycle accident or my dad having diabetes. And like, I think a lot of dark comics have this "I'm too cool for you" energy. But my energy is very like, I'm going to be cute and fun, but we're going to talk about my grandma being buried in a pet cemetery.
What?
And yeah, it's a true story. That's a real thing that I talk about on stage. And people react the way you do. They're like, what did she just say? Did she say that?
Your grandma is straight up buried in a pet cemetery.
She is. Yeah, she wanted to be buried next to her favorite dog in New York City. So in an urn. It's not like a full. My dad and grandpa didn't bury her like full body, but she's out there, and we keep having to think about how we're going to sneak grandpa in because security's gotten a little bit tighter at this pet cemetery. So he's not there yet. We're still working on it. Yeah.
So you're hoping this episode doesn't go real viral because people don't need to know about that?
Yeah, I didn't name the cemetery. So, I mean,
there you go.
Here's hoping they can't catch on.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
Mm-hmm.
I think about things like this because I'm weird. The family trees pretty much end with me and my sister. We don't have kids. We don't have grandkids. It's a huge family that goes right at the the bottom of our tree.
Sure.
There's not really going to be anybody left when I'm gone. At the same time, I love like Victorian times and like gaudy, gildy like cemeteries and monuments, and I love old decrepit cemeteries. So part of me wants to like be buried at like the oldest like forgotten cemetery I can think of. Part of me wants to just save the planet and just be put in a box with a plant in it or something. But then the other part of me is like, no, I want a big old monument so that 200 years from now, it can look all creepy and freak people out.
In like goth people's pictures. Yeah. You want to be the one. Yeah. It's weird though. Cause then like my dad, ever since I was little, like probably like 6. So my mom is very Catholic. She wants to be buried. She wants him to be buried next to her. But he'd always be like, I want to be cremated and I want to be thrown all over Yankee Stadium. I'm like, you mean like Monument Park or like outside? He's like, no, I want you to jump onto the field and put a little, a little on home, a little bit on the pitcher's mound. I'm like, so you want me to go to, you want me to go to jail for your burial? I'm just like, can't we just have one normal, like, why does it have to be this way? And every time my mom would be like, he's joking. He's not going to do that. He's like, yeah, I'm joking. And then he'd turn around and he'd be like, Megan, you're my eldest.
Like
you
wink,
have
wink.
to. Yeah, like you have to. So I'm just like, all right. I mean, we'll see, I guess.
Oh my gosh. Well, speaking of your family, you grew up in a haunted house that was built in the 1700s. First of all, that was obviously on the East Coast. And, I, as big of a paranormal nerd as I am, until 10, 12 years ago, I didn't have a lot of paranormal experiences and I wasn't interested so much in the paranormal. Right. It's kind of a late in life thing. And so I'm kind of weirdly jealous of people who grow up with paranormal experiences because I feel like they got to start their whole paranormal track early. And, I'm trying to catch up, having experiences. And you say you saw a ghostly man as a toddler. And there's also an experience that reminds me of an experience that I had a few years ago, but seeing a mist at your bedside. I mean, tell us about a few of these super cool, but I'm sure creepy experiences you had growing up.
Absolutely. So yes, I grew up on the East Coast in the Poconos area. So lots of woods. I grew up on a lake, which was so much fun during the day, but definitely, it got that creepy fog at night and it was just so quiet. And, This house was built in the 1700s by a man named Manuel Gonzalez, and he basically inherited the land for fighting in a war. It definitely wasn't the Revolutionary War because the house was built before that. I'm not sure because I know it was also used as like a fort in the French and Indian War. So pre that, whatever, it might have been just like a land dispute or something like that. But that's how he obtained it. And he built the house. And in, I guess, the 30s or 40s, my grandparents purchased it as a summer house. My mom grew up as a kid there, loved it. And then she, when she was old enough, moved in. A lot of history to say. It was a lot of different things. It was there used to be a train that ran through. So it would be like a place where people could board for the night. It was also a summer camp for a little while. So sometimes in the house, we'll see like kids wrote their names in like a closet or something, or we'll find like a sheet of like, I want to be a hairdresser and here's why. So all kinds of weird stuff. When you look around, my mom found a sword in the yard. She's a big gardener. It's like probably like 13, 12 inches. And we can't figure it. I posted that on Reddit to see like what it could be. And I'm thinking it had to be like a farm tool or something because it's not like big enough to like kill people. So I'm hoping it's, well, I mean, any sword is, I guess, big enough to kill people. But anyway, the first real story that I have, I barely remember. I was a toddler. I was 4 and I'm a twin. So me and my twin were in the baby room, and on the monitor, my mom and dad could hear me crying. And my mom came in and she's like, baby, like, what's wrong? Like, why are you upset? And I didn't say a lot of words yet, but I just said, man. And I just kept saying, man. And she's like, man. And she's like, trying to like comfort me. She's like, what did the man, like, what did he say? Did he say something? Did he do something?
What every mother, I'm sure, wants to hear when they walk in their toddler's room.
Yeah, of course. She's like, okay, perfect. She's like, did he do anything? Did he say anything? And I just grabbed her hand and started like caressing my face and saying, cold. And just saying like, cold, cold. And she's like, where is he? And I pointed behind her. And that's when she's like, nope. And she just scooped me and my sister up and ran back to the room and had my dad check the whole house. And they found no one. So that was the first experience in the house.
Okay.
Crazy.
Every listener with kids right now is like, thank you for traumatizing me.
Yeah. And I know that. So my dad is like a big jokester and he likes to scare us just in general. And normally my mom's like, stop teasing them, but she lets it happen. But for this one, I know this is super legit because whenever my dad would tell us this story, my mom would be like, don't tell them that. That didn't happen, like trying to hide it from us. So we're like, all right, mom, whatever.
It sounds like I like your dad a lot.
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, it's funny when he's not like scaring us, but he's a goofy for sure.
I mean, gosh, there's 2 stories for sure that I want to hear. But you said that a piano in the living room played by itself.
Yeah, this is my sister's story, again, which gives credibility to it because her and my mom, very similar, very not uptight, but they're no nonsense, I guess, is their attitude. And they don't really buy into this ghost stuff the way me, my little brothers, and my dad do. But my sister woke up one night and we had a little baby grand piano in the living room and she heard music being played and she thought it was my dad, which indicates that it's not just like random keys being hit, like say like, a cat or something. It was like a full song. But then when she went down, the music stopped and no one was there.
Wow. You and your sister you experienced these things differently. So she doesn't have as many of these experiences.
Yeah, it's weird. So we're twins and we, sometimes I feel like we picked up the personality traits the other one didn't have, kind of because we were always together. So I'm like all in. I'm like, this is so cool. And she's like, it's not cool and it's not real. And I refuse to believe. So I'm like, all right, well, that's an opinion, I guess.
What do you say would be your skeptic to believer ratio? Like, how full on believer are you?
I would say before doing Real Chills, I was much more skeptical. Like I believed in the ghosts in my house, but I also understood it can't really explain it. I'm not going to look into it. But after Real Chills, like I'm just in. I'm all in now. I've had all of the stories on Real Chills are, to my guess, they are 100% true. No one wrote anything or embellished. And the stories I've heard, I'm just like, there has to be something, at this point, I'm way more of a believer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Tell us about this mist thing next to your bed. Let's have some people call in their therapist today for an appointment.
Well, I'm excited to hear that you had a similar thing, because this is the story that makes me feel the most insane. Like when I tell people it, I'm just like, I know how it sounds. So I was probably a little bit older, like 7 or 8. And I was sleeping on my side in my bed. And all of a sudden I just wake up, my eyes just pop open. And there's like a misty, it's like a form. It doesn't look like a person, like a full person, but it's like body sized. And you would think you'd be scared, right? Like it was so visible. It wasn't like, oh, something, maybe it's like a trick of my eyes. Like I knew I was seeing something, but instead of feeling scared, I felt peaceful. I felt happy, and I felt curious, and I reached my hand out into the mist, and it was tingly. It had a sensation to it. It was like, I want to say the closest description is like wet, but it wasn't like, the feeling, the sense of water. I don't know how to I feel crazy trying to describe this, but I just reached out, I touched it for a little bit, and then I just went right back to sleep.
It's one of the only stories I've ever heard on this show where people have experienced reaching out and telling me about the sensation of feeling it. I almost never, no one ever goes that far. No one ever gets that far, I guess I should say. So that is super interesting that you are having to try to figure out how to describe the feeling of reaching out into this mist.
I've talked to other people about this, and I don't know if it's because I had just woken up that I wasn't scared. Maybe it chose the right time to show itself to me, because I don't know if I was awake and it just appeared or rolled up, if I would have the same calm reaction. So I also think it's crazy that I did that, but I just felt, how when you just wake up and you're like, you feel good, and I don't know, I just didn't feel that fear. So I don't know if I'd ever do it again, honestly.
But that's awesome.
Young.
That also, there are a lot of people. I even know people who are super interested in the paranormal that also are traumatized by it. Like they have experiences where they fear it, but at the same time, they can't resist it, Right. And I think a situation like that can kind of be someone's help people be calmed by it themselves. Like, well, if she had this experience, just because I see something or just because I feel something, maybe that doesn't necessarily mean I have to fear for my, life and my soul.
That's been been my whole, that's kind of my mission when it comes to ghosts is I think you should use caution. I think ghosts match energy. I talked to Ryan Singer about that. I think if I was negative or angry, or if anyone in the house was, maybe it would be a different story. But just because there's something more residing in a place doesn't necessarily mean it wants to hurt you. It might just want a connection too, because that's really what it felt like with this ghost or whatever. I just feel like it feels connected to our family, and I genuinely don't feel, sometimes I am scared because I can't explain what's happening, but I genuinely don't feel threatened, I guess, by it.
So now let's tell us more about your podcast. What inspired you to create the podcast as a comic, and how did you envision it? And then tell us about the things you end up talking about on the show.
Yeah. So Real Chills, obviously growing up in a haunted house, I've always been kind of obsessed with the paranormal, and, I have a lot of really funny friends. So, and I felt like in the paranormal sphere, a lot of the TV around paranormal and some of the podcasts, not all of them, are very serious, very aggressive or scary or dun dun, scary music.
Sensationalized.
Yes, exactly. Sensation. So I was I want to make a podcast that is almost lighthearted about the paranormal. We take the stories very seriously. We talk about them, but also we joke about them. And we kind of make light of these weird situations that people experience. So I just felt like there was room for that in the paranormal community. And it's been so much fun having, a lot of really professional paranormal people, but also I try to balance it out with comedians who have seen things and are like, I want to talk about it, but I don't know if anyone will believe me. So that's kind of like, I was hoping to fill that space, basically.
That's awesome. Do you listen to Roz Drezfalez?
No, what is that?
Oh
what is
my
it called?
gosh, shut up.
I've
I've had Roz on my show. Roz is now, I think, identifies as a trans artist, but the character of Roz was always a drag queen. And they're on the West Coast in the LA area. And it's very comedy, but also like just hilarious. And it's a very paranormal heavy, but also comedy and drag queen mixed in.
That.
Yeah, you need to check that out.
Yeah, please send me a link to that because that's right. I love when like good paranormal and comedy, like have you like What We Do in the Shadows, another great example of just like paranormal comedy, fun. Anyway, that's like my favorite thing.
Yeah. Well, your podcast might lead me to checking out some other in that whole genre.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. Who is your listener?
Big fan of the paranormal, doesn't take themselves too seriously, maybe has had an experience and feels as though people don't believe them and, wants confirmation that, hey, there's like a whole space of people that believe you saw something and it wasn't just you were tired or maybe you drank a little, so someone that wants to be believed and enjoys comedy, likes to laugh, likes to take a lighthearted approach at things, even if they're dark or scary.
Tell us about some of your, more memorable guests.
Oh, man, we have some really good Bigfoot stories. We have 2 different episodes on Bigfoot, which is really cool. Really 3 actually now. And they're all very different perspectives, which is exciting. One that I always bring up is we had a guest that remembered being born. Yeah. And he's Spanish speaking and he remembers thinking in English, being born, speaking Spanish, learning English, and then remembering, that's what I was thinking in. Crazy story.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was... Yeah, see, it kind of like makes you stop and go, holy cow. There was a 2-parter we did with this guy who his family had like a haunted farm and he had all the history of like why it would be haunted. Like there was this really creepy guy. He jumped off a cliff. They never found his head. And now they see this goat, like this headless ghost, like walking the path back up. Anyway, like back up to the cliff. Just like so many. There was like a time slip episode where this guy, he was in the woods and he was looking for his friend. They were high and one ran off and they stopped at this like circle and like he couldn't hear any noise at all. And he thought he was only there for like a minute or 2. And it turns out he'd been gone for like an hour and a half from the rest of the group. So it's all over the place. The stories we compile. Yeah.
Yeah. Those time slip things are really, I don't have expertise in anything, but those fascinate me. I don't know what to say about them. I don't know how to explain them, but when I hear a good time slip story or like time warp story, I'm like, oh my gosh, is it freaky? Is it scary? Like,
I feel like there's so many theories too. Like for when we talked about it on the podcast, a big thing was aliens. Maybe he was abducted. Maybe they were abducted. Maybe something like that happened. Because I know people lose a lot of time with aliens. Another is just like time isn't linear as we thought. Everything is like, and you can slip through to other places in time. Yeah. I hate that one. That one I refuse to like fully believe in because how do you get back? That's my big thing is like I can accept aliens because usually they put you back, but time slipping into other time periods, I don't know. That's a nightmare.
Well, I will tell you, I have quite a few listeners of this show that I know get into Bigfoot and aliens, UFOs type thing. And they don't necessarily get a lot of that on this show. We're pretty ghost heavy, spirit communication. And so that's cool. They know now that if they're wanting a little bit more of that, they need to go check out some of those episodes. So maybe I'll link some of those episodes in the show notes so they can get their Bigfoot on.
I'll send you the Bigfoot episodes. And we also have one who I believe it's a Roswell. It's a 2-parter Roswell episode where their uncle was in the military and has some crazy alien experiences. So if that's what they're looking for, I'll send you that link too, because that was an awesome episode. Yeah, I'm telling you, I was skeptical, and then just the stuff people believe, it's so convincing.
You're listening to the Big Seance podcast with Patrick Keller. Be sure to check out bigseance.com for more discussion.
This episode of the Big Seance podcast is brought to you by Jim Harold's Campfire. And if you like stories of the strange, the weird, and the unexplained, well, then you need to check it out. Jim has been podcasting since the early days of podcasting. In fact, I think he's the OG paranormal podcaster. And he's approaching the lucky 13th anniversary of his Campfire show. If you haven't listened yet, the concept is pretty simple. Jim just talks to regular peeps about the strange stuff that happens to them for 90 minutes every week. Ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, and head scratchers. He doesn't exaggerate or play a lot of spooky music. The stories just speak for themselves. Here's a sneak peek from a recent episode that I think Big Seance listeners would appreciate.
This is a cool story that reminds me of my childhood days playing with tape recorders. So Brent, tell us your head scratcher.
Okay. Nice to talk to you, Jim.
Nice to talk with you.
This story happened about around the early 80s. This was back before everybody had camcorders or nobody even thought about phones that you could use as video recorders.
Right.
And my buddy Carl and I used to play around with a tape recorder. And this happened on a summer evening, early 80s. My parents were down the block at a cookout, and my sister was out with her friends. So it was just Carl and me up in my room that night. And we were just doing something silly. Who knows what we were recording, but we finished whatever it was we were doing. And I said, well, okay, let's listen to what we did, what we've done. So I rewound the tape, press play. And for a few seconds, there was nothing. And it was a little strange. And then all of a sudden, this very high-pitched kind of sing-songy voice came on. And I can't replicate it now that my voice changed years ago, but it said, "They are by themselves." And then nothing. And I hit stop. I looked over at Carl and I said, "Did you hear that?" And he said, "What was that?" I have no idea. So I rewound the tape, hit play. Again, there's a silence.
Yeah.
And then that voice comes on again, real high. "They are by themselves."
Ooh.
And this kind of freaked us out because we were by ourselves.
Oh, man.
And so I said, all right, one more time. So it stopped, rewound, played it again. "They're by themselves." One last time. Nothing. The voice is gone. Just silence for like 5 minutes. I don't know where whatever we recorded went. I don't know where this voice went or what it was.
Oh, that is creepy.
But it was pretty frightening. And after that, I played the whole tape through several times, over the next few days. Never heard it again. Have no idea what it was. But the interesting thing is, I told my parents, and they didn't believe me, of course. But about 30 years later, Carl and I have been out of touch for years, but we reconnected on Facebook, and he lives in Australia now. And I was wondering if he remembered this. So I sent him a very vague email just saying, "Do you remember something weird that happened with a tape recorder years ago?" And he responded almost immediately, and he described exactly what happened.
By
he
themselves.
said, yes, and it just never never left his mind, and it'll never leave mine. That's for sure.
And it wouldn't have left my mind either. Regardless of the stories on Jim Harold's Campfire are true and fascinating, as told by ordinary people who've had extraordinary experiences. Jim supports us, so let's all tune in to Jim Harold's Campfire on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to The Big Seance.
Thanks for joining us for the Big Seance podcast. We'd better get back to the table while there's still some candlelight left.
And this is funny because I've never had the opportunity to ask this to anybody. And maybe I should always ask this to people. But what about the paranormal makes you laugh?
I think that I honestly think it's just such an intense, like it's such a serious, it's funny to laugh when you're not supposed to.
Uh-huh.
So like, it's like taking your biggest fear and then belittling it almost makes you feel more powerful, like taking this and being like, oh, okay, you're Mr. Spooky Ghost. I'm so scared, and you're like, all right, I'm not scared anymore. I feel fine. So it's that energy, that like tension of, oh, I'm actually really scared, but like, let's poke holes in this, like it's not that big, bad and serious. It's actually, does that make sense? I don't know if I answered your question.
No, it does make sense. It makes me think of like, when kids are bullied or go through bullying experiences, a lot of times they have to also join in and kind of make fun of themselves.
That's exactly,
too,
yeah.
so that nobody else thinks that you're traumatized.
Yeah. It almost is like another comedy to me, just in general, is like a retaking of power. So it feels like I'm taking it back and I'm now in control of something that really none of us have any control over.
There you go. I love it. What about the paranormal makes you roll your eyes? Or maybe you're not even an eye roller. I don't know.
Yeah, I try not to be an eye roller, but I definitely feel like I have my moments. I don't necessarily like when people are super aggressive towards the paranormal, like our friend over at Ghost Adventures that like yells at ghosts and stuff. That kind of makes me, and I'm a fan. I won't lie. Like the show is entertaining, but I don't particularly enjoy that, or I don't like when you're telling a story and it's gratuitous towards the trauma that happened in the space. Like, okay, I do want to hear the history, but maybe don't tell me, like, don't read from their diary or something. Like, I give them a little bit of, respect. So I think those are things that make me kind of like, because then I wonder what you're really in it for. Because I do like the history and I do like, oh, okay, so someone died here. That makes sense. But if you're just like telling this big, long, awful story about like the worst time of someone's life, I'm not really inclined to watch you ghost hunt after that, if that makes sense.
Or the dramatic reenactments with the blood squirting across the room. Or
yeah. It makes me sad. I'm like, oh, I understand trauma happened here and that could have left an imprint, but
yeah,
I don't know.
I feel especially uncomfortable when they start doing those, and I guess most of the time it is, but when they start doing those reenactments in the space of some of those things,
yes, that is a big one.
Woo!
I feel like they're doing it on like purposely to invoke reaction, but it's so cruel to make someone rewatch if they are there that moment, so. Yeah, I don't love that at all.
Yeah. And at the same time, though, like you said that you're a fan, you still watch them. I don't watch as many of the shows anymore because honestly, I feel like once you've seen so many, and maybe it's also that I've been in the space and have done paranormal investigation, at least for a time period, I was doing it a lot. And so after a while, I just get bored. Like, I can't tell you how many paranormal shows I fall asleep on because it's the same pattern. It's just like, how many times can you sit there and be riveted by, what was that? And it's not really anything. So I can't tell you how many times I've fallen asleep in my chair. And then part of me is like thinking, I'm criticizing it because it was boring. And I'm like, well, you don't want them to embellish things to make it exciting for you to sit there and watch, because that's what it was.
Yeah, there's some shows that are better. Like, I agree, like Ghost Adventures. I don't know if we can talk, like, I don't know if you're allowed to like call them out or whatever, but
many times they've been called out on here.
Okay. Yeah, same on our podcast. It's a love-hate relationship. It's one of the first shows I really watched getting into the paranormal, so it kind of is nostalgic for me to watch them do their same old tricks that they always do. But then there's other shows. Like, have you ever seen Dead Files?
I have seen a few episodes of Dead Files. And actually, who's the medium on the Dead Files? My audience has requested her to be on the show forever, and I've tried to get her on the show, and I can't get her on the show.
It's too high profile.
Yeah, that's one of the bigger, guest requests that I get, and I'm like, I'm trying, y'all. I'm trying.
Well, it's a great show. I get why your guests want, because it's one of those ones.
Is it Amy Allen?
I think Amy sounds right to me. Yeah. Yeah. That one never gets old to me because it's really like, as long as it's not faked, I believe it. I try to believe everything I see, which is not how you should live your life. But as far as the paranormal, I don't like to I'll question things, but I don't like to just be like, that's fake without any, it could be real, it could be fake.
Well, you want to believe that everybody has a good heart and is being truthful.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it would hurt the paranormal community so much to find out that is all scripted, because it's so cool to see how close. Do you know the premise of the show?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so cool to see how close they get sometimes.
So a more investigative side and then like a more intuitive side, right? That's the whole. Yeah.
And the guy reminds me of my dad because my dad's like an Italian New Yorker. So I'm also like, oh, TV dad, get it done.
What do you think about psychic mediums? Do you get into psychic mediums? To that whole kind of not exactly the ghosty part of the paranormal, but
it's actually kind of complicated because every medium is so different. I do believe in them. I do believe some people have gifts. I also believe there's a lot of people that see they can make money off of being a psychic and are not truthful. So I do think people need to be careful. I've been to bad psychics where I'm like, you can tell the second, like just the energy, the stuff they're mentioning. You're like, all right, this was a bust. I wasted $30, whatever. But then I've had a psychic on my show, Casey. She's like an empath psychic. And without me telling her anything, we had like a session and she really picked up on some things. What was cool about her being an empath psychic is not only did she kind of pick up on conflict that's going on in my life with like my family, but she felt for me. Like she could feel how I was feeling about those situations. She was able to talk to me about it in a way where it was like very like disarming, because she was like, and this is making you like, you're feeling like, ostracized for this, or you're feeling, and I'm like, yeah, how did you know? Oh my God, so I believe her. And
get out of my head.
Yeah. It's like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I don't want to be this open, time out. And, even if she gets it, maybe she might get something a little wrong. I know her heart's in the right place. She wants to do it to kind of talk you through whatever that thing is, she's not just trying to make like a quick buck off of you or something. So I think it can go both ways. I am really excited because in April, I'm having a pet psychic on my show. I know. And she's going to talk to my cat. I'm so excited.
Very
my
cool.
Cat is such a jerk. She's like the meanest little tabby. And I'm like, I feel like I'm going to get roasted the second anyway. So
I've had an animal psychic on the show. We didn't cover a lot about it. The interesting thing about all my listeners and, the community that we've formed on Facebook, my Facebook group, which you'll have to join, I have a lot of people who feel like they have the skill of being an animal psychic or an animal intuitive.
Wow.
And so I often see them kind of practicing in the group. I do think it's interesting. And as a dog lover, for sure, I'm like, read him. Come on, here's the picture.
I want to know. Yeah.
Why is he not eating this current food I have?
Yeah. But I'm also afraid to know the answers. I'm afraid she's going to be like, she doesn't feed me enough, even though I feed her a lot, like she's going to make me look bad. But
God, why is she such a bitch?
Yeah. She hits me. I've never hit you ever, because she would do that. But
what do you think happens when we die, or when we get to the other side? Do you ever think about that? Does that ever cross your mind?
That's changed a lot since the podcast too. I grew up in a really religious household, and I'm not angry at Catholicism, so I'm happy to let my family still believe there's heaven. But from a really young age, I remember learning that the premise of heaven was just praying to God all day and being like, Oh God. All right. Well, that's the best case scenario. After your death, we're just in church. Anyway.
I think I'm washing my hair that day.
It's like, well, maybe they'll let us play if we pray enough, like outside for an hour or something. But I kind of started believing in the collective unconscious, where like all of our energy just combines. And you shoot back down as someone else, like as you're being born, like we kind of like reincarnation. But I just believe there's like a big collective, like we're all connected. Our energy is all connected. And it's kind of made me like a better person. At least I think so, because I believe everyone should be in a good spot, like even anyone, it's hurting all of us to have this trauma. It's collective trauma,
So, it really is. Yeah. PTSD.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I don't have a lot of scientific explanation for it.
Does?
But yeah, true.
Outside of your podcast and outside of stand-up, which your stand-up gig is getting really exciting and you're young, and so it's exciting to think about where you're going from here. But what's outside of all of that, what's the nerdiest thing about you?
The nerdiest thing about me. Oh, man.
We encourage nerdiness here.
Other than stand-up. Oh, no. I'm going to phone a friend. Can I phone a friend?
You can phone a friend. Oh, my God.
Okay.
This is awesome.
I'm just asking my boyfriend because I know I'm really nerdy, but I don't know. Sometimes
you need somebody with an outside perspective.
Yeah. Comedy takes up so much of my time that when I'm not.
Uh-huh.
The most embarrassing thing is I like to read romance novels. That's a thing I do a lot with my time. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's nerdy. I'm going to call him.
Okay, do it.
I'm so sorry, Patrick. I'm like,
no, I love
I'm trying to think. Hey, other than comedy, what's the nerdiest thing about me? Like, what is my nerd thing? Is there anything not paranormal related, Dan? Or am I just am I in over my head? Okay. So he's telling me that I should tell you the nerdiest thing that I'm into right now is I have a work from home office and I call it my gothfice, like a goth office. And I've just been collecting the weirdest things I can find and filling my work office with bones and old casket receipts and
oh my God, I love that you went here so much because there's so many listeners right now going, yeah.
So I know it's still paranormal, but between comedy and paranormal, that takes up so much of my life. But the gothfice, I've started cross-stitching for it. I cross-stitched a little ghost thing that says, "Hey demons, it's me, ya boy." Have you ever seen that video? Anyway. Yeah, so...
You don't have like a torture chamber started off in the corner or something, do you?
Not yet, but with the way my customers are, maybe. I might have to start one, honestly. So.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I love that you straight up phoned a friend for this question.
Yeah, I don't... Because I think everything I do is cool. I'm not sure if you feel the same way, so it's like hard for me to look back and be like, oh, maybe not everyone would be excited that I have a bone just hanging in my office. I could probably bring some people out.
Once you're in this space a little bit longer, I think you're going to rock some of that stuff with pride.
Oh, I mean, I'm really excited. It's looking really cool. I have like some sassy Nightcrawler print that I really love. And
well, speaking of these things, what is your most treasured possession?
Oh, man.
And it does not have to be related to anything that you would think I'm looking for.
Right. My most treasured possession. So I do have a stuffed animal from when I was a kid. His name is Tiggy. He's a tiger, surprise. And he's probably my most favorite. So the reason, the best part about him is that the reason he's my favorite stuffed animal was out of spite. I was at Claws and Paws, which is a zoo in the Poconos. And my dad was like, you don't need another stuffed animal. You have 1 million. And I wore him down and he bought me Tiggy. And I was like, this is now my favorite. And it stayed that way. And I think he's my favorite. I know that feels dumb. Like I should probably say something more useful, but
no, it's truth.
Comforting. I've chewed his whiskers off. We're best friends for life. yeah, final answer. That's what I'd save in a fire if I could only take one thing. But
he's probably looking pretty rough right now. I'm assuming.
Yeah. He's not in good shape for sure. He already looks like he's been through multiple fires. So
I still have my very first teddy bear. I wouldn't necessarily say it's like a treasured possession or that I even remember I have it sometimes, but it's in the guest room hanging out on the bed and looks it kind of ages me when you see it. It's like, oh wow, that looks like something you would see in a museum. But
I'm getting there, yeah. I brought him to college. He had a good 4 years at college, and now we're both settling down in Philly.
You have some exciting things going on. Probably some things like before we started recording, you were telling me that there's some exciting stuff that you can't even say right now. But give us a little hint of maybe what might be coming up on the podcast, what's coming up in your world, any future things coming up, and then where people can find you. And then, I'm just going to overwhelm you here. Any final thoughts you have and tell us where we can find you.
Final thoughts. This was really fun. Thank you for having me. I had a blast talking about all the spooky stuff. Things coming up. I mean, obviously the Pet Psychic is dropping. We have a guest who writes thrillers for Lifetime. We're going to release an episode with him, which was really cool, hearing like the mentality and like the formula. So definitely check those out. You can find me, my Instagram at Real Chills Podcast. Or if you're interested in comedy, if you're on the East Coast, because I do comedy all over the East Coast, you can follow my Instagram, my personal Instagram, which is Meg Goetz Money. Goetz is spelled Goetz, like my last name. Check out my Instagram. I post all my shows there in my stories, especially if you're in the Philly area, because those are really fun.
Yeah.
And again, thanks for having me.
You totally rock, and I'm glad that we connected, and congratulations for being the best comic on the Big Seance podcast.
That's a credit. I'm going to use it now.
Thank you to the following super paranerds who support this show at patreon.com/Big Seance. Michael Henson, Anne Marie Sullivan, Natalie N., Kim Robb, Josiel Lorenzo, Susan Davey, and Amy Park Gedicke. My supporters at the Parlor guest level, who can be found at bigseance.com/Parlor guests, are Allie of Hocus Pocus Collector, Miranda from SpookyLittleHalloween.com, Chelsea from Cheers with Chelsea, Linda from ShimmeringMoons.com, Anne Rekovich from OzParatech.com, Janae Michaels from Grey House Tarot and Farm Artifacts, Mitchell Coombs from MitchellCoombs.com, Dina DeCastro of Dina DeCastro Astrology, Lena and John of Carbon Lilies, Sarita Cockerham, Christine Rath Selhi, Mindy Kentop, Hope Battaglia, Melissa Armour, Diane Rax, Nettie, Bruce Williams, Christopher Kohler, Jim Budd, David Rubenstein, and Norman and Linda Keller. That sound you just heard was the above and beyond there's not even a category for your level of support fireworks display, because I have 6 awesome listeners who support this show at the $10 level. Peggy Hagan, Glenna Becker, Steve Skinner, Kevin Gilbert, AJ Meredith, and James Wilfong. So thank you, Peggy, Glenna, Steve, Kevin, AJ, and James. And thank you, Paranerds.
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. And you can continue the discussion and hang out with a great community of Paranerds by joining us in the Big Seance Parlor on Facebook. Want to hear your voice in a future episode? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.